Okay, so you've given us this really fascinating set of materials all about the spot where project management and being an entrepreneur kind of come together.
Yeah, for sure.
And our goal in this deep dive, right,
Yeah.
is to really pull out what's going to be most useful, most insightful, most helpful to you. Almost like a shortcut to getting it so you don't have to go through all the pages yourself.
Definitely.
And we've got a lot here, Like we've got the real basic concepts, and then we've also got some really specific tools. And all of this stuff spans both, like tried and true project management methods, and then also the world of actually starting and growing a business.
Right. And I think what makes this intersection so interesting is that while, you might look at those and think, oh, those are two totally different things, project management, entrepreneur, but actually you need both of them to really succeed.
Yeah.
And you're looking to learn fast and learn a lot. And that's exactly what we're aiming for. We want to give you those aha moments, those takeaways you can actually go and use today.
Exactly.
So I guess the question is, where do we start? How do we unpack all of this?
So let's go right back to the beginning.
Okay.
Right back to the fundamentals.
Back to basics.
Let's define our terms here.
Uh-huh.
If we look at the table of contents, page 4, lesson 1, how do they define project management in a way that's going to make sense for us here?
Well, this source, it says that project management is basically using your knowledge, skills, tools, techniques, all strategically applied to the stuff you're doing on the project. And what's the ultimate goal? To meet those specific requirements of the project.
Right.
So it's like a structured way to make sure work gets done well, on time, on budget.
Perfect. Yeah. And then let's see, table of contents again, lesson 17, page 166. Now we're getting into entrepreneurship. How do they define that in a way that we can sort of use as we work our way through all this?
So this source, it says an entrepreneur, is somebody who takes the initiative, right? They organize things. They take the risks that come with a business. And the idea is see the opportunity, go for it, make something new. A lot of times, you're in a world where there's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah. Totally.
As page 2 mentions, it's really all about bringing those new ideas or even coming up with totally new ones into reality.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we've got, on the one hand, the structured management of like a specific thing you're doing. And then on the other, this, often less structured creation and risk-taking of a new venture.
Totally.
But like we said, they're not separate. They're linked. Why? Where's the link? Why is project management so often like key to an entrepreneur succeeding?
I think the link is all about getting it done. An entrepreneur might have this amazing idea, but how do you actually turn it into something real?
Right.
Whether that's a new product or a service or a whole company, it's going to be a bunch of tasks, and they're all connected.
Yeah.
And you got to plan them, organize them, manage them. That's where project management becomes like your best friend. Taking those new ideas or inventions from just an idea to actually selling them, that takes structure, that takes a plan to make it happen.
I love that. It's almost like the entrepreneur provides that what and the why, and then project management's giving you the how to actually get there.
Exactly.
So let's jump into some of these like core ideas in project management that are especially helpful if you're starting out.
Okay.
So on page 4, lesson 2, and page 11, what are the big characteristics of a project?
Well, what's interesting here is that if an entrepreneur gets these characteristics, it helps them see when they got to switch into that project management mode.
Okay.
The source says a project has a clear scope, like what's it about?
Yeah.
And it's temporary, it's not forever.
Right.
It's got a timeline, a start and an end, and it needs resources. Money, people, material, stuff like that. Yep. So if you're launching a new business, seeing those elements right in the beginning, you can treat it like a project, something to manage carefully.
That's a great point. Let's say you're developing an app, right? That's not just like an ongoing thing. There are features you're building. That's your scope.
Right.
You've got a launch date you're aiming for. That's your timeline.
Exactly.
And you've got to have developers and designers. Those are your resources.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you frame it like a project, now you can use those project planning tools.
Right.
Right. The ones mentioned on page 4, lesson 13, page 125.
For sure.
What are some of those tools, and how could they help somebody who's building something new?
Totally. So these tools, they bring order, they bring clarity. The source talks about Gantt charts and network diagrams on page 40.
Okay.
A Gantt chart, think of it like a visual roadmap. It shows all the tasks, how long they'll take, and how they're connected. So if you're juggling a million things, it's really helpful to see the big picture and track your progress. Then you've got network diagrams. They show the sequence of things, what has to happen first, second, third. They help you see the critical path, which is the stuff that has to be on time so the whole project doesn't get delayed.
Right.
And they can show bottlenecks so you know what to focus on. So basically, you're putting some structure on the unknowns, the things you can't predict when you're starting something new.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
And even if you're just starting out and you're doing it all yourself, the idea of a project manager, like they describe on page 4, lesson 4, page 37, that still matters.
Absolutely. Even if you're wearing all the hats, you're still managing yourself, right? You're the team.
Yeah.
So you got to do those core things, like on page 8, define what you want to achieve, manage those resources, especially when you're starting and they're limited, and motivate yourself. You got to stay focused, believe in your vision.
And your own cheerleader.
Exactly. And then as you grow, get more people, these leadership skills become even more important.
Totally, yeah. And one thing that's so easy to kind of push off when you're just in the thick of building is communication.
Yeah, for sure.
And they talk about that on lesson 16, page 156. Why is communication so vital when you're an entrepreneur, and who are the folks you really need to be talking to well?
Good communication is like the blood that keeps everything going. For an entrepreneur, it can make or break you.
Yeah.
This source, it stresses having a communication plan, tailoring how you talk to different people. And entrepreneurs, they got to talk to a lot of different people, and these people are important.
Yeah.
Like page 158 says, you got investors, you got to convince them your business is worth it.
Right.
You got your first customers, got to keep them informed, happy, listen to them. And as your team grows, got to be clear and consistent so everyone's on the same page and things get done.
Totally, yeah.
If you don't communicate well, people misunderstand, things get delayed, you miss opportunities, and that can be really bad for a new company.
Absolutely, it can be fatal. All right, so we've looked at all these project management ideas that are really important for entrepreneurs. Now let's flip it. What are the things about being an entrepreneur that can actually help you manage projects better?
Okay.
Let's start with page 4, lesson 18, page 178, entrepreneurial traits. What are the big ones there?
It's cool how the same stuff that makes you want to start a business can be super helpful in running projects.
Yeah.
So taking risks, calculated ones, of course. Entrepreneurs are better at dealing with the unknown, which happens all the time in projects. And they want to achieve things, get stuff done, they're driven, and that translates directly to finishing projects.
Makes sense, yeah.
And then there's creativity, which they talk about on page 167. Entrepreneurs are great at finding new ways to solve problems, and you need that in project management when things go wrong, which they inevitably do.
It's like that saying, expect the unexpected.
Exactly. Think about an entrepreneur who has to completely change their marketing plan because the first one didn't work. That's that same risk-taking and creative problem-solving a project manager needs when something major goes wrong in a project.
That's a really interesting connection.
Yeah.
So basically, that drive and that problem-solving mindset that entrepreneurs have, that can make projects way more dynamic and interesting.
For sure.
All right, so we've also got causes of success and failure of entrepreneurship on page 173. How does that connect to how projects turn out?
If you think about it big picture, the reasons why some businesses succeed and others fail, they're often the same reasons why projects go well or go bad.
Interesting.
Like this source says, not planning enough and bad management. Those are big reasons why businesses fail.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they're also classic ways to mess up a project, but then, figuring out what the market needs, building a strong team, actually getting stuff done, those are all key to both success in business and in projects.
So it's all about starting strong and then keeping that momentum going.
Exactly.
Now, this next one might seem a little big picture, but bear with me. The role of entrepreneurship in economic development, page 4, lesson 19. What can our listener take away from that?
So, yeah, it is a little more zoomed out, but if you get why entrepreneurial projects are valuable, why they matter, it can be really motivating. It's not just about you succeeding, it's about creating jobs, bringing new ideas to life, helping the economy grow. Knowing that can really keep you going when your project gets tough.
It's a good reminder that you're part of something bigger.
Exactly.
All right, last one on the entrepreneur side. Entrepreneurship motivation, page 4, lesson 20, page 198. What makes someone take that leap, and how does that connect to the kind of dedication you need for a long-term project?
So a lot of times it comes from deep inside, They're passionate about an idea or a problem they want to solve. They want to be their own boss. They want to build something meaningful. And that kind of motivation, it's fuel. It keeps you going when it's hard, when it takes a long time to finish a project. When you really care about the outcome, you're going to push through setbacks, overcome obstacles, and just keep going.
Yeah, because you have that personal stake in it.
Exactly.
All right, we are seeing how these two things, they really are intertwined. Let's get practical now.
Huh?
What do these sources tell us about money and actually making things happen?
Okay, let's do it.
So page 4, lesson 3, page 24, sources of long-term project finance.
So this is huge if you need money to grow your business.
Yeah.
This source, it gives you a rundown of different ways to get long-term financing. Equity financing, where you give up part of your company for investment, and debt financing, where you borrow money and have to pay it back with interest. But what's important for entrepreneurs is the details within these types. On page 25, it talks about different kinds of preference shares. You got cumulative, non-cumulative, convertible. It's important to understand what each one means when you're negotiating for funding.
That makes sense.
Oh, like say your startup has a rough patch. Profits are down. If you have cumulative preference shares, any dividends you missed paying, they pile up, and you got to pay those shareholders before anyone else gets dividends. So that's something both the investor and the entrepreneur got to think about.
So it's all about understanding what you're getting into.
Exactly.
And then once you do have the money, you got to use it wisely.
Right, for sure.
So page 26, cost of capital and project selection. Why should an entrepreneur even care about this minimum return?
Basically, the cost of capital, it's the minimum amount of return your project needs to make your investors happy, whether they own part of your company or lent you money.
Okay.
Entrepreneurs got to understand this because it tells them if a project is worth it. If a project won't make more money than the cost of capital, it means it's not creating enough value to cover the risk.
Right.
So even if the idea is cool, doing that project could actually hurt your business in the long run.
Right.
It's all about making sure your business can grow and make money sustainably.
So it's not just about chasing cool ideas. It's about being smart with your money.
Exactly.
All right, so you've got the money. You know what pitfalls to look out for. Now it's time to actually make it happen.
Yep.
Page 4, lesson 7, page 66, project implementation. What are the big things an entrepreneur needs to think about when they're making their vision real?
This source, it really emphasizes planning everything out in detail before you even start doing anything. A good plan is your roadmap.
Okay.
Then communication is key during implementation. Page 68 talks about that. Keep everyone on the same page, let them know what's happening, and if any problems come up. And this is big. Entrepreneurs got to be thinking ahead.
Always looking ahead.
Anticipate problems, whether they're technical or, page 80 says political.
Okay, what do they mean by political problems?
Well, in a startup, it could be team drama, changes in the market, or even customers suddenly wanting something different.
Okay, so like internal and external stuff.
Exactly. If you can spot those problems early and deal with them, your project's got a much better chance of succeeding.
So it's not just the idea and the money, it's how well you plan and how you adapt and communicate that really determines whether you'll succeed.
For sure.
And of course, today, you got to talk about software.
Yeah, technology's huge.
Page 14 mentions project management software for startups. What are the main benefits, especially for those small, new businesses that don't have a lot of resources?
Project management software can be a game changer for startups, especially when they're trying to be efficient and organized.
Yeah.
This source points out some key advantages. First, it helps you calculate things quickly.
Like what kinds of things?
Budgets, expenses, timelines, all essential stuff for startups that are watching every penny.
Right.
It also helps you use your resources better because you can see who's doing what and when they're available. But maybe the biggest thing for startups is that it lets you change things quickly. You can adjust schedules, move people around, and see how things are progressing in real time. That's a big advantage when everything around you is changing fast.
So it's about using tech to stay organized, work together better, and be flexible when things change, which they always do.
Exactly.
Okay, last but not least, let's look at page 98. Skills and attributes needed to be a project manager, especially the ones that are most important for entrepreneurs who are basically managing their own business.
Right. So the source lists a lot of great skills, but a few are crucial for entrepreneurs. Communication, got to be top-notch.
Yeah.
You got to sell your vision to investors, explain tasks clearly to your team, and build good relationships with your customers.
Right.
Then organization, got to be on top of all the tasks, deadlines, resources. There's a lot to juggle when you're running a business.
Absolutely.
And even with a small team, team building is key. You got to create an environment where people can work together, stay motivated, and get stuff done.
Yeah.
And finally, problem solving. That's huge. Every entrepreneur, every project manager, you're going to run into problems, setbacks, surprises. Got to be able to handle them.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big thing you want our listener to take away, especially if they're in that world where project management and entrepreneurship meet?
I think the big takeaway is this. If you take those structured methods and tools from project management and weave them into your journey as an entrepreneur, you're going to be way better at turning your ideas into something real and successful.
Yeah.
And the other way around, if you bring that entrepreneurial spirit, that creativity, that adaptability into your projects, you're going to be able to roll with the punches and actually thrive when things get crazy.
I love that. It's like finding that sweet spot where structure and flexibility come together.
Exactly.
We've just scratched the surface here, but hopefully this deep dive has given you a good foundation, some key insights, and like we said at the beginning, a shortcut to understanding all of this.
Definitely. And as you keep going with your ventures, I'd really encourage you to think about this.
Okay.
How can project management, which seems kind of rigid, actually be a source of stability and direction when you're in the unpredictable world of starting a business?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And on the flip side, how can that entrepreneurial spirit, always innovating, always adapting, bring some much-needed energy and flexibility to how you run your projects?
Yeah, I love that. So it's not one versus the other, it's how do they work together?
Exactly. It's about finding that synergy where both of them can thrive.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.